to be gentle and start where you can. And the reason I say that is because I am not gentle with myself. And when I say be gentle, I mean with yourself, right? Sure. I'm not gentle with myself, and nor am I patient. And those two together are a real deadly combo.
Welcome, Matt, to the PivotMe podcast.
April, first and foremost, expressing my gratitude yet again for this opportunity. Really excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. So Matt and I were just talking a little bit offline about some of the reasons why he led the podcast, his podcast. It's such a good story. I'm going to ask you about that, Matt. So we just obviously read your bio. We got a little bit about you, but first tell us why you started the podcast, because I loved that story you just shared with me.
Yeah, as mentioned, it is slightly selfish, but at the end of the day, after working with Damon John of Shark Tank, that was my first job out of college, and having direct mentorship and access to an individual that I aspire to be like in all areas of life, not just in business, but in his relationship, in his healing journey, in his friendships, in the way he mentored, like the list goes on. Yeah. I realized that I, although had and still do have a relationship with him, it's not as direct, nor is it as frequent as it was. So I was being urged at the time by a former intern, turned coworker, turned great friend of mine, who kept saying, Matt, you need a podcast. You need a podcast. And truthfully, at the time I was working, I'm like, dude, I don't have the time for that. Who does? Yeah. Right. And it got to a point where after I left my job, I really had nothing to do. And I realized, like, all right, cool. Maybe subconsciously the driving factor to starting this podcast is to have direct access and mentorship to individuals that I wouldn't necessarily have access to without that podcast. Yeah. And coming with the Rolodex in which I did, I said, you know what, this is an amazing opportunity. And now 225 plus episodes into it, we're rocking and we're rolling.
Oh, that is awesome. So I want to ask you at the podcast, but first I want to point something out. That was your first job out of college. How did that happen?
That's a really interesting story. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it. Let's do it.
Okay. So am I allowed to use profanity?
You are. Okay. We rock the E.
All right. I fucked up in many areas of life. One of them was academically. Mm-hmm. And truthfully, we can go down the rabbit hole of why probably some inner child healing needed to be done, whatever the case is. But ultimately, I got my shit together eventually. Mm-hmm. I had failed out of college. Without going too far back, I had failed out of college, got myself back in after maybe like a year hiatus because you're just on academic probation and all of that BS. Mm-hmm. So transitioning forward, I really got my shit together. I realized the school that I was attending, the students there didn't necessarily have the access and or the experiences that I've personally had. And at the time, I was running a business that was bringing in, I was really bringing in over six figures at, a really young age. And I was very grateful for that, working with the likes of reality television stars, hip hop artists, pop stars, like really, really incredible people. And I took on a leadership role in college. And at that point, I was in Dominican Republic on my spring break during my junior year. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting poolside with a drink and I got a call on my cell phone and I said, why the hell is my school calling me? First and foremost, I paid tuition because I paid it my damn self. Yeah. And then I'm like, what could they be calling me about? And on the other end of the line, the woman was inviting me to meet Damon John on my college campus in 1 week.
Wow.
To connect the dots some more, he grew up in the neighborhood in which my college was located. He was coming to promote his book for a speaking engagement. I was one of 3 students to meet him in the green room before he hit the stage. Last person to shake his hand before he hit the stage. He looked at me. I know I have a really big head, but he looked at me like I had 10 of these. And that's because I said to him, Damon, I'm going to work for you. Lo and behold, 2 months later, 3 months later, I was interning for him. Turned that internship into a job. And now we're here. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. So you said you had so what business were you doing before then that gave you those connects? So you were comfortable at that level.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is the business also was the reason I got connected to Damon in the long run. Basically, I was an independent contractor in New York City hospitality. A bunch of friends, I call them family at this point. We were in business for nearly 7 years, some of them longer because they are older than me. They've probably been rocking for maybe 10 to 15 years, and very grateful for their guidance and, them taking me under their wing. But we had an incredible run in just hospitable events, whether that be social events, networking stuff, really, really fun times. And we worked with really high profile clientele. It was absolutely incredible. And it, paid really, really well. So
Sure.
it was great to be able to pay my way through college because after I failed out, my parents just cut me off totally
Hmm.
and had to figure it out. And that's how I did it.
Yeah. Was it hard to focus in college when you have this side gig that's what most people want for salaries? I mean, is it hard for you to go
Yeah.
and focus?
Absolutely. And I think ultimately it was a driving factor of me failing out because and there's
Mm,
other factors as well, right? Like, yes, career is one lane of life, but I also had other shit going on. My mother was battling cancer as I was in college. And to be honest, I was just so numb to that experience because who wants to see someone they love in pain?
sure.
Especially when you can't control it. I'm not a doctor. I have no clue what she's experiencing,
Hmm.
so there were numerous factors. And although I did own and operate a business per se. At the same time, I, never really settled because at that point in my life, I thought money was going to heal all the pain that I've, experienced from childhood and beyond.
Sure.
So what I was doing was just hustling. I would go to school. I would work this nightlife business on the weekends. I would work at a gym. I would work at a pizzeria delivering. Like the list went on, and I would just stacking cash, stacking cash.
Yeah.
It made me think that I didn't need college
Hmm.
because I had access and the ability to run it up financially through hustling,
Sure.
literally physically hustling. But I also didn't realize that wasn't sustainable because now I'm 29 years old and
Yeah.
I can't hustle like that anymore.
Sure.
Like I truly can't.
Sure. Sure. So, yeah, that's what I was curious because I'm like a lot of kids that are in college are like, man, I hope I get out and make a six-figure salary, and you're like, I'm already
Mhm.
there, and I'm a sophomore, and it would be hard to focus. Let me ask you, like, what was going through your head when you had the opportunity to meet him and you said, I'm going to work for you? Like that takes guts. Like,
Yeah.
what were you thinking? Was that characteristic of you, or something you would do, or was it just you're caught up in the moment?
You just gave me the chills, April, because I've never been asked that before. And I don't think it was even me that said it. Like
Mm,
and I don't mean to get all spiritual and woo woo here. Like I just feel like something came over me and pushed those words out of my mouth.
wow.
So looking back on the experience, I mean, we had less than a 5-minute conversation. And after working with him for 3 years, I realized how many people say things of him, say
Hmm.
things to him of that nature,
Yeah, I bet.
right? You do 200 plus speaking engagements a year. You have people coming up to you saying, "Oh, invest in me. I want to work with
Sure.
you."
Yeah.
Right? That's just pretty normal.
Hmm.
But it came out of my mouth. So I think it was a greater power that just, made me do it.
Yeah, that takes guts. It takes a lot of courage to do something like that. And so then when you're going to intern with him and then eventually work for him, like are you battling imposter syndrome at all? Like are you going, why me? Or are you in there and you're like, yep, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be?
I great question again. I had a facade at that point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I mean, I was just so externally driven,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so externally driven, so materialistically driven. What kind of jeans could I wear? What kind of car can I drive? So on and so forth. And I don't necessarily think I had imposter syndrome, but and not interning. It was more so when I became an employee because I had a level of comfort at that point. As an intern, you got to be on your A game,
Yeah.
especially if you know what you want.
Sure.
And I wanted that salary, and I wanted to work for this company that only had, I don't know, 30 employees max. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one had the same title. Like I really, really wanted to do that. And yeah, I mean, in short, to answer the question, it was more so a facade than imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. So what changed? So that sounds like before.
Yeah.
What changed?
Healing. Um, and I can't say that I'm done. I know the whole show is about pivoting, like healing from the inside out. And truthfully, what put me even down that journey, as a kid, my parents were divorced, and just the courts were like, you got to put this little fifth grade boy into therapy so he could deal with his shit. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in fifth grade. I don't even know
Yeah,
what kind of shit I have to deal with. So
exactly.
there, I think therapy. You know what I would do? I would go into my therapist's office when I was in that at that point in life, and I would count the books on his bookshelf while I
Mm,
was in those sessions. Like that. That's what I would do
wow.
there, But in June of 2020, I had a wake up call, just a relationship gone wrong. And it just put me in a really weird spot. And all of a sudden it led me down a journey of, really digging deep and seeing like what's up. And once I've done that, life has been different.
Wow. That's amazing. That's a hell of a pivot point. It's interesting because a lot of times those situations were like, we didn't want to be in them. A lot of times they happen to us, but ultimately that's, some massive growth comes from that, whether that's healing, just, growth in general. But um, was your life kind of marked like before that date and then after that date?
That's a really interesting question too. As you were saying that, I was just like, you know what? Maybe it is like BH and AH, before
Yeah,
healing and after healing.
for sure.
Uh, yeah, I think in a sense of, and I appreciate that question, because ultimately I know who I was before and it's not that I was a bad person. I don't want to,
Mhm.
make it sound like that. And I definitely started to mature more and more and more before even leading up to like really working on myself, because I was
Mhm.
always into personal development, the Tony Robbins, the
Mm.
walk on fire type of stuff. I love
Sure.
that stuff.
Yeah.
But there was a level of maturity which obviously pivoted me from who I was, with this grandiose ego,
Mhm.
and then just a lot more calm, a lot more intuitive, a lot more at peace with the healing journey that I'm currently on. So that's a really interesting question, because I just looking from it, a full spectrum perspective, I do see a difference, and I appreciate you bringing me down that path.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to imagine. So this, you said grandiose ego. Where is that coming from? I mean, if we've got like childhood trauma and then we end up with the ego, is this compensating? Is what's happening there?
The ego, I like to think at least well, everyone has one, right?
Sure. Sure.
Just throwing that out there. It really comes down to who has their ego in the driver's seat versus the back seat.
Hmm.
And mine was in the driver's seat of the largest car in the world. Like, it was just like you're and the fastest car. Like,
Yeah.
it was crazy. It was just really crazy. Ultimately, I think my ego stayed in the driver's seat to create a sense of self-worth,
Mm,
to create a sense of self-importance, to kind of show some sort of toxic masculinity, I would even say.
sure.
Yeah, just like fake worth, pretty much. That's what it was.
Mm,
And the ego was just driving that. And it was just, don't get me wrong, like there were good things about it. It did make me hustle. It did
mm-hmm.
make me say outrageous things to high profile people that got me internships and jobs, in a
Sure.
sense, so there most definitely is a positive to it. But there's also the negatives, pros and cons, for sure.
Sure. So the way you ran a business before, when that was in the driver's seat of a very large car, I love that. Love the imagery. The way you ran a business before versus the way you run a business now, how are they different?
It worked back then because the area in which the business was operating was
Hmm.
in a sort of materialistic realm, right?
Sure.
If you go to a nightclub, you can order a magnum bottle of champagne that costs $10,000.
Hmm.
So when you bolstered an ego, you acted like your poop don't stink, like all
Hmm.
of that stuff. It almost played to my advantage, right?
Sure.
It was just the realm in which I was in. Now today, in regards to how I run my business, it's much more mindful. I think that's the word
Hmm.
to use. I'm able to step away when I'm too tired, which I never did back then, because I
Hmm.
mean, we also operated in the wee hours of the night all the way up until 5 a.m., 6 a.m. sometimes.
Yeah.
So I wasn't stepping away. Just mindful is the way that I would express it. Mindful in who I work with. Do we align? Or am I just, bringing you in because I need a paycheck? I don't
Hmm.
operate like that anymore, as opposed to back then. It's just like, give me all the money, give me all the money, give me all the
Yeah.
money.
I'm here for
There's
it.
a
Yep.
totally different motivator at this point.
So if someone is excuse me, if someone is listening right now, so if let's just say we got a pivoter listening that's like, so I'm running my business and maybe I've got some work that I need to do and they haven't gone down the road. So whether that's healing through therapy, books, ashram in India, there's lots of ways people do it, right?
Yep.
If they're feeling like, yeah, I've got some work to do, what advice would you give them?
To be gentle and start where you can.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because I am not gentle. with myself. And when I say
Yeah,
be gentle, I mean with yourself, right? I'm
sure.
not gentle with myself,
Mhm.
and nor am I patient. And those two together are a real deadly combo. And
Yeah,
I'll tell
I
you when,
totally resonate. I was like, yeah, that's the same way I would describe myself as well. Not gentle,
yeah,
not patient with yourself or with your own
well, listen,
results.
I mean, the pivoters that are tuned into this,
Mhm.
sure, they're high performing individuals. So like we
Yep.
want to see results. We want to, we want to take action. For me personally, I remember when I started my healing journey, not only did I hire a CBT, a cognitive behavioral therapist, but I
Mhm.
also hired a coach who was a former psychotherapist.
Mhm.
I started flotation therapy. I started yoga. I'm like, I bought
You
CBD. I'm
went
like, I'm
all
just going to
in.
do everything,
Yeah.
you
Sounds
know?
like the way a high performer approaches healing right there. Like that was exactly how they do it.
Right. So ultimately be gentle. And I'm still working on that. Right. So I need to take my
Mhm.
own advice here, but be gentle because things are going to unfold when they need to. Otherwise, they would have unfolded already, or, maybe they don't need to unfold. Who knows? Be gentle with yourself. And ultimately, it comes down to trusting the process a little too, because it is a process. It's
Yeah.
not something that happens overnight, which is, hard to hear sometimes, especially for me and for all the high performers that are listening to this, but that's the truth.
It's so true. So I had a Rick Sheffron on a few weeks back, and he's amazingly successful. He did like the first automated webinar, and he's advised. He's does marketing advice for all the gurus, and he said something very interesting. He said, "I have a theory that we create businesses that satisfy a need we had in our childhood."
Mm.
I want to float that by you. Like, how much do you see of maybe the unfoldings of your childhood show up in your business? It's kind of a heavy concept for me to drop on you, but I'm
No, it's
curious if
not.
you've
It's
got thoughts on that.
incredible. That's incredible. It makes me think. So, I run a branding agency, and ultimately, the reason I started this was because I really credit a lot of my experiences and, just, resume stuff to the personal brand I've been able to build for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just talking about, oh, like, I'm not talking about like a logo or a
Sure.
this or that. Like, I'm talking about like really, giving people the idea of who I am before they can assume that.
Sure.
And it's interesting. So to connect the dots here, I think, wow, maybe the reason I started this business and the reason I value branding so much is because it's allowed me to project a sense of worth to individuals before they could assume my own worth. Again, that's kind of a little
Mm,
externally and this is
sure.
the first time I've been asked this, so I'm trying to
Yeah.
work it out here on the air, but that is kind of what came to mind when you asked that, and I'm holding this little truth stone in my hand. So if that's coming from the heart, then that's what I'm going with.
Wow. Yeah. When he said it, it rocked me, just to be clear. So when Rich said it on the podcast, I was like, damn. And I said, well, what did you most want in your childhood? And he said, freedom. And I
Mm,
was like, that's mine too. So it really stopped me in the tracks when he's throw this theory out. So I wanted to throw it out to you too, because I started to kind of pull on that thread a little bit with other business owners, and they're like, there is a lot of times I'm creating something that I wish would have existed. Sometimes it's in previous companies that you worked with, and you're like, all right, I don't want to do that. I'll take some pages from their playbook, but there's a lot of things I'm not going to do. But a lot of business owners, when they sat down and thought about it, they found that quite a bit of their childhood, or maybe some things that were missing from their childhood, end up showing up in their business today.
so that's really interesting. I have a client that has a pretty catchy catchphrase that says your pain is your brand. And
Hmm.
she says that in
Yeah.
reference to individuals starting a business around their pain, and I think
Okay.
the two kind of run on a little bit of a parallel track.
Mm-hmm.
um because ultimately, whether and a lot of us aren't, right? Like I truthfully wasn't aware of a lot of my childhood pain until I picked up the book that I have next to me, called Homecoming by John Bradshaw.
Mm.
um and yeah, I mean, I really wasn't aware of it, and obviously, my therapist kind of pointed stuff out, and it was just hard for me to connect the dots until I picked
Mm-hmm.
up this book. But ultimately, like, yeah, we have that pain. So I don't know, that's a really, really interesting take. And the first thing that comes to my mind, like I said, is your pain is your brand.
Yeah.
That famous catchphrase. So that's going to make me think on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, so with your experience with working through the pains that you've experienced and your experience with healing, When you look at other business owners, whether that's clients that you work with or just ones that you've interacted with, how are they self-sabotaging? And is it because they haven't done the process of healing?
It is. So there's another book called The Big Leap. It's by Gay Hendricks. I've noticed in my life before I did the healing, and we're going to talk, before healing, after healing, as we just discussed earlier. Before healing, I would continuously self-sabotage when things went so damn good that I couldn't believe that I deserved to be rewarded by, my hard work in such a way. I'll give you examples. At a very young age, I accumulated, I don't know, $50,000 in the bank, whatever it was. I was in my very early 20s. I blew all of that, all of it. And I want to be gentle with myself. I did pay my college tuition. I did take a couple risks with it. I did intern for a year without getting paid. So just painting the picture here. But what I should have done, and maybe this is just a maturity thing, and I think this was self-sabotage, which is why I'm bringing it up. What I should have done was change my means of living, right? Like I should have lived below my means at that point. And I didn't do that. And the reason I didn't do that, to connect all of the dots here, is because I didn't want to feel less of who I was. So taking the Uber XL when I don't have a paying job and I am one person and I don't need the truck, but I'm going to get the truck, the Suburban, to come pick me up, to act like I'm someone that I'm not. That's self-sabotage in a way, and it truly, truly is. And even beyond that, right? I just did a challenge called 75 Hard by Andy Frisella.
Yay!
You did it?
No, I just love it. It's on my list for this year. So it's just funny because I was just talking about that with my mastermind right before this call. So
I love that.
Coming up again. Love it.
So I did 75 hard. I did it through the holidays last year. I did it through Thanksgiving. Man. I did it through Christmas. I did it through New Year.
You're serious.
I was serious, but you want to know what's crazy? After a few days, and I mean, the results were incredible, mind-wise, body-wise. You get it. The results were so incredible. Again, even though I'm on this healing journey, there was still some self-sabotage, because you know what? There were many nights I cracked open a bottle of wine and had all 4 glasses within it by myself. There were many nights that I didn't have pizza for 75 days, and even days after that. But then you want to know what? I went and I overate.
Yeah.
And our relationship to food, our relationship to alcohol, our relationship to tapping into too much abundance. Like it's really interesting. So, I mean, I can go down the rabbit hole of self-sabotage. I've been there and done that many times.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I love that you point out that like you could complete 75 hard and then still sabotage afterwards. Like you can learn all the lessons, you can get the experience, and it's amazing. And yet we're still going to stumble. And I think that's so important for pivoters to hear, because a lot of times we get connected to this idea of perfect execution. There is no perfect execution. Like there's just progress, and you will always get off track. The idea is, when you do the work, the personal development work, when you listen to PivotMe, the idea is that we just get you back on track quicker. But if you're under the impression that you'll never get off track, that's just not the human experience. So I love that you shared, like, hey, I knocked it out of the park and then I drank a bottle of wine. I knocked it out of the park and then I ate a pizza. That's relatable, and that's real. All that matters is that when you do self-sabotage, you get back on as quick as you can.
You have to, right? You have to. And truthfully, I didn't. In fact, I actually let myself slowly spiral from a physical health perspective. I just fell back into a comfort zone, right? Because it was actually uncomfortable to have such successful results from a program like 75 Hard.
Really?
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
You sabotaged after you completed it?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
You look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, damn, am I supposed to look this good? Am I worth looking this good? And the sabotage kicks in, not consciously.
Sure.
Like not consciously, subconsciously. And I think that's where a lot of this shit lives, is subconsciously. So yeah, I mean, I don't say to myself when I look in the mirror, damn, am I supposed to look this good? Do I deserve to look this good? I don't say that. But I mean, who would? That's, none of us would.
Sure.
But yeah, that happens.
But your actions stack up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they compound. They can compound negatively, or, you could turn the ship around. You can compound positively, right?
So what do you do when you're in that? So we all self-sabotage, and we all have a cycle of self-sabotage. It's
Mhm.
really powerful if you can acknowledge that. That's one of the exercises we do in the mastermind, is understanding kind of the stimulus and response, and the triggers will always be there. And what we try to do is change your response to the triggers. And
Right.
so it's like when this happens, maybe it's you lost a contract, or for some people it might be losing a job, or a argument with their partner. But when you're in that cycle of self-sabotage, do you have something that you do to get yourself out?
I'm going to be honest. I truthfully don't, because sometimes I don't even recognize that I'm in the self
Mm.
sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just think I'm living life.
Yeah.
Right. And then you could also get caught up in the toxicness of, and listen, there is balance in life.
Sure.
You are allowed to eat pizza, but you should also, maybe drink a fresh juice or eat your vegetables too, right? There
Yeah.
is a balance without a doubt. And I think there's a little bit of toxicness around the, enjoy yourself fad. Like don't be too strict with yourself, because then I can enjoy myself every day. you
Yeah,
know
exactly.
and that's what I credit living life to. And I don't always recognize when I'm in self-sabotage or I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're bringing up an interesting point. Like, obviously having a hyper awareness of like what's going on in your life, whether that be a journal, or maybe you're micromanaging yourself on a day-to-day basis, and like literally breaking it down by every 30 minutes to finally realize by the end of the week, holy shit, I had pizza this day, this day, this day, this day,
Sure.
this day. I don't know, maybe that works for some people. Truthfully, I don't have anything like that in place, so maybe I'm going to have to after this conversation.
Yeah, no, we always ask about the self-sabotage thing. Like, how do you do it, and how do you get yourself out of it? And
Yeah.
and I think you brought up a great point, which is you have to first recognize you're doing it. And many of us don't
Mhm.
even realize it. And sometimes it can help us when we have we'll say a trusted friend. That not everybody gets to speak into your life. Not everybody deserves a ticket. But a trusted friend that's like, "Hey, this is this thing that I do. If you
Right.
see me do this, hold me accountable." There is such power in having effectively an accountability buddy for your self-sabotage. Like, when I get super fit, I kind of get into the spiral of worthiness, or am I supposed to look this good? And so then I sabotage. Help me through that. When you see me doing that, call me out. I've actually just real time, I thought of one, which is um, one of the ways that I can sabotage is sometimes I'll want to do a trip, or travel, and I will start to get cold feet when I get close to it. Not because I don't love travel. I'm an avid traveler, but because I have two daughters and I feel bad about being away from them. And so when I'm booking it, I think, oh, I'm excited to do this thing. I was talking to a friend yesterday about doing a humanitarian work in Peru. And I said, now hold me accountable to the fact that when it gets closer, I'm going to start having second doubts. Like, I know that I'm going to start thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because of this. And I'll start presenting all of these reasons why I shouldn't do that, and doubt my decision. So that's a way that I sabotage on something that I know is really important to me, know that I really want to do. So I have a trusted friend, and Tammy, if you're listening, you know who you are, that they call me out when I'm doing it. They're like, no, you're doing this thing. Don't do the thing. Like, it's going to be great. And you're inspiring your daughters to do the same thing. So knowing your flavor of sabotage,
Yeah.
knowing that cycle, what triggers it, and then what you typically do, and then pre-plan, but I'm going to do this next time. Next time I'm going to do it differently. And it's okay to have a friend along with you. Just like, if you see me start doing this, that's what I'm doing, and call me out so I can get back on track.
Yeah, I love that. That's really powerful. I'm glad that you got that. That right there is nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to us about the business that you're running now. You say you run a branding agency. Talk to us about what you're doing.
Yeah, more so focused on personal brands. That's what I was doing with Damon. I got hired literally to just continuously revolutionize and digitize his brand, on
Mhm.
social, on websites, digital courses, even books. So yeah, maybe physical stuff as well. And I really took a liking to it, because you get to, really control the narrative. It's almost
Sure.
PR in a sense,
Yeah.
where you get to control the narrative of how the public eye views you. You get to choose what your messaging is. Like, it was a really, really great experience. And I said to myself, how can I continue to do what I was doing
Hmm.
on a larger scale with more people? So at first, and listen, I'm going to keep it real, my first year of business sucked. Like, it was really, really
Sure.
hard. And it was actually really dark, because when you're a high achiever and someone that, is a high performer, and you're
Hmm.
used to having a certain type of result, and you're not getting that type of result, and you're like literally scrummaging around for clients. Like it's really difficult.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, eventually I was able to get the ship rolling, get the ball rolling more and more. And I've been working with incredible individuals and some, business brands as well to really, really help them with consulting them on getting their word out there, or what their word, maybe even finding their word, right? Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, and I had this conversation recently, like a lot of individuals think their word is one thing, but realize that's just the mask they're wearing.
Sure.
So we actually have to even do some like psychological work to be able to uncover that, to truly reveal the person that's underneath that. It's a really, really incredible opportunity to consult with individuals and help them create, the brand they're looking to create.
So to pull this information out of them, do you feel like your own healing journey really helps you
Totally.
pull this out of them? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a therapist sometimes. I did not go to school for that, so do not consult me for therapy whatsoever. But no, I mean, I get that a lot in
Mm-hmm.
regards to people that have been to, maybe that have had a coach, right? I mean, listen,
Mm-hmm.
April, if you learn something today,
Mm-hmm.
from a coach of your own, you're able to teach on that to an
Sure.
extent,
Yeah.
and I realize that my healing journey has allowed me to connect with people on a deeper level,
Mm-hmm.
a level that I wouldn't have been able to, like, we couldn't have this conversation 3 years ago, you
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
maybe I could have faked it. I can
Sure.
sell a little bit, but yeah, we probably wouldn't have been able to, get this deep, but yeah, it's definitely helped. Definitely.
That is amazing. So talk to us about the impacting 1 billion lives.
I said that, that's so funny. I said that when I started speaking, right? In 2017, I had just graduated college. I was on just to clarify, I was on the 7-year college plan for the 4-year degree.
Yep. I
I
know
did
that
not come
one
out.
well.
Yeah, I did not come out of there with a doctorate, although I probably should have,
Mm-hmm.
or a master's.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that being said, after I graduated college, I was posting just like random blogs on LinkedIn. That was big at the time. And I
Mm-hmm.
was just speaking on my experience, like how I turned my internship into a job, little things like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
had a college reach out to me, Nassau Community College, which is on Long Island, New York. And they were like, "Hey, I want you to come speak." This is
Mm-hmm.
where I had imposter syndrome,
I
because I was like,
bet.
"You want me to come speak?" Like, I didn't really understand why, but I was like, "All right, cool, let me do it." So I went, I did it. I did not prepare for it whatsoever. I thought I was going to be able to wing it for
Always a good
45 minutes
strategy.
straight. Yeah, I thought I was going to speak for 45 minutes straight. I spoke for probably 15, looked at my watch, and I said, "What the hell am I going to do for the next 30 minutes?" Like I was like, "Oh my goodness." But ultimately, the reason I bring all of this up is because after that day, or even during, I had, like when a significant other kind of gives you like a butterfly feeling.
Mm-hmm.
The students that I was speaking to were giving me that because of the way they were interpreting my message. And I was like, whoa, like I just gave back, and I felt really, really good about that.
Yeah.
And I never want to stop doing that. I never want to stop feeling that feeling. Like ever. I'm getting the chills saying that, because that is one of the most beautiful feelings. And that's led me to do not only speaking engagements, but I built a library in my local community.
Wow.
Like I love reading, like love
Mm-hmm.
reading. We had donations from Gary Vaynerchuk, we had donations from David Meltzer, John Gordon, Damon John, Marie Forleo, like really
That's
incredible
awesome.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And even beyond that, like I just realized like helping people made me feel so good. And I always ask myself, like, how can I help people? Is it jumping on a podcast? Is it raising $15,000 to feed the front line when the pandemic first hit? We were
Mm-hmm.
feeding nurses and doctors and NYPD, FDN, like the list goes on. It just really boils down to like, and again, maybe that's selfish that I do it because it makes me feel good, but that's the truth. It really, really does. And at the same time, it helps other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the speaking story. That is it's so relatable too, of like, oh, well, I guess I should have thought about what I was saying about, planned what I was going to say. And yet it ended up leading to a speaking career.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you got the opportunity to actually connect with the people that you were impacting. So if we're just up on stage, we don't really get a chance to know their stories or understand how our words have affected them. And I'm so glad you had the opportunity to hear that feedback and go, wow, I could really speak into these people's lives. Our message is so unique to us. No one else has
Mm.
exactly our message because I haven't had our exact experiences. And no doubt the both experiences you've had, but also the transparency that you'd bring to it. I don't know if you're bringing it back then when you first started speaking, but no doubt now people are really going to benefit from that. I think a lot of people assume that someone who's had the success that you've had, who've been in the circles that you've been in, um, they're going to assume you got it all together. And none of us have it all together perfectly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even, at times and not just me, I just know, individuals out there can get caught up in wanting to keep that belief in other people concrete, right? Because you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
look, again, you don't want to look less of, you don't want to, I don't know. I mean, I get
Yeah,
caught up in that.
sure.
That's just the realism of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, speaking really set it off for me. It's been an incredible journey. I've literally gone places I never thought I would go, like North Dakota or Jackson, Mississippi, and like I'm just a boy from Queens, New York. I never thought I would go to those places, but it's cool. It's really cool.
That is awesome. The riveting places in North Dakota. I love it. So I have I have one follow-up question. But first I want to ask Matt, if the pivoters want to connect with you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I mean, if you just type in my name on Instagram or Twitter, or I'm on all of them, probably more than I should be in full transparency.
Yeah.
Definitely get caught up in that, and that is my go-to distraction. But yeah, you could DM me. I have always, answered all my DMs on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, LinkedIn. Just type in my name. I'm sure I'll pop up.
That's perfect. We'll put the links in the show notes as well. So Matt, here's our last question. If you could tell the world one thing, what would it be?
Mm. That's a really big question, and I'm going to steal my response from a mentor of mine named John Gordon. If you're not familiar with him, he puts out a book almost every month, it seems. He's a he's a best-selling author. He's a really, really incredible guy. And I discovered his book after one of his books after walking into an Amazon bookstore in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up just because it was, I don't know. I don't know why I picked it up. It was called The Energy Bus. And I read this
Mm-hmm.
book, and I took one thing away from it that will forever be with me. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, which is why I said I'm stealing this from someone. But it's an equation. I suck at math. I still suck at math, but this one's a lot easier. And the
Mm-hmm.
equation is E plus P equals O. And what that stands for is events plus perspective equals the outcome.
Mm.
And although we don't always have a say in the cards we're dealt, we don't always have a say in the experiences. We can't control other people. What we
Mm-hmm.
can control is how we perceive it. And that is not easier said than done
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever. In fact, it's actually rather hard, especially when you're going through some shit.
Yeah.
And it is, maybe it takes 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years for you to look back on an experience and be like, wow, this is how I perceive it, whether that be a breakup, whether that be, something in business, whether that be, health related, whatever
Mm-hmm.
the case is, there is a reason for everything. And, you could always, and I don't want to sound toxic positive here at
Mm-hmm.
all. Like, I don't want to sound like that at all. That's why I'm saying it might take some time for you
Sure.
to, change your perception on something. But I mean, you could definitely, definitely find something good in
For sure.
almost anything you go through.
I think that's such a good reminder, and what's important about that. I liked that book too, and what's important about that equation, Matt. I love that the whole events plus perspective equals outcome. And I
Mhm.
think that if you haven't done the work, you make the mistake that you think events equal outcome.
Mhm.
Like, well, there's no perspective. There's no casting a different, looking at it from a different angle. It's just the events equal this outcome. And it's a way really for us to justify sometimes the things that we're not doing well, sometimes the mediocre results we're getting, and we're like, oh, it's because it's the events.
Yeah.
But you're missing the P, the perspective. It's your perspective. And if you shift, because the events don't necessarily change, that's a pretty constant thing. This thing happened, but our perspective of it can change. And just by changing the perspective completely affects the other side of that equation. I mean, the outcome can be
Absolutely.
completely different.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's something that just really stuck with me for years. I mean, I read that book and I want to say 2016. And, whenever I get a question like that, that's probably the most monumental piece of advice I've had to date. And
So
obviously
good.
there's other things. I mean, there's plenty. If you ask me more, I can give you another one. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like that is so simple and just something that we all have control over to an extent, and something that we could all work on. Because I mean, I hear stories, I'm sure you hear them on the podcast, you know, with the
Mm-hmm.
pivoters and even beyond that. You know, perspective is a really, really big game changer.
Absolutely. If you're looking for even more ways to level up your business and your life, we have set up the next video for you. I'll see you over there.